What's up, fam? Scotty here, Black Talk Radio News Report. I just want to address, and I've addressed it in some previous posts, but this fear of a wider regional war. Now, I understand people's fear, but if we just go by the numbers, as I've done in other posts, they don't have enough people to invade Iran. They don't even have enough people to hold Iraq. All right. So we're talking up to 2 million people possibly with Iran's troops and affiliated militias and the troops in Iraq, who has been asked the United States to leave. But one of the things I wanted to point out, I heard a podcast, I'm going to share a little bit of that podcast with you, and talking about Israel's manpower shortage. And so that's why I say there's no threat, or the numbers say there's no threat of an invasion. We're not dealing with sensible people. And we keep hearing all this talk through the media, as if some of the sources is coming from the top of the Pentagon and the Trump administration. And so who knows? Maybe they are that dumb to try an invasion under these circumstances in this modern era of warfare. All right. And so we've heard talk about Israel and its Greater Israel Project, and I believe that's what they're trying to carry out now. They are attacking people in Syria. They're attacking people in Lebanon. They're pushing into the West Bank of Palestine. Of course, Gaza is still being starved and genocided. And they're participating in attacks in Iran. What they're trying to do is project strength, but they don't have that strength. All right. Their army is stretched very, very thin, to say the least. And according to some official, I think he's in the IDF, he said they're nearing collapse. And so we'll get to that. So even if Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth was dumb enough to try to invade Iran and try to stage a large number of troops in that region, it's going to fail. And it's going to be a mass casualty event. But my point is to point out that they're going to expect U.S. Working class people to die in this war for the Greater Israel Project. Okay, because the Israelis don't have enough troops to commit to such a ground invasion. So who's going to be the casualties? Primarily U.S. Military personnel, and that's just a sad fact of the matter. So let's take a listen to this podcast that kind of backs up my assertions. Thank you.
To that point, Jasper, the IDF chief warned about some of the things you're talking about here, that the IDF is on the verge of collapse after 900 straight days. Of course, because reservists are being sent to Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, West Bank, and there's no Orthodox conscription. It has approved, like you said, legalization of dozens of more outposts and farms in the requiring additional troops to protect them, as well as Jewish national.
So as you heard there, the IDF possibly could collapse. And I just want to point out again, the Greater Israel Project wanting to expand from the river to the sea. Okay. They don't even have the people and personnel to carry that out. Right. Their military is severely depleted. You got a lot of IDF soldiers are also committing suicide and reporting PTSD symptoms because they're just overstretched. Okay. And so they have a shortage, a very severe shortage that they can't make up. But in order to make the Greater Israel Project to carry on or to be successful, that would take the United States working class people who are in the military. And what benefit is it to the United States people? None. We never get any kind of benefits out of these wars. Not that we should be looking to gain from ill-gotten oil or resources or what have you to make our lives easier at the expense of others. But this has to stop and it has to come to an end. But that also leads me into an issue with the U.S. military, where there is a current crisis. There's a unprecedented surge in dissent. We got 1,000 who are a 1,000% increase in conscientious objectors within the military, and a lot of them don't even know about that they can claim such a status. We're hearing reports about low morale and distrust the Pentagon leadership and Donald Trump. Troops do not want to die for Israel. And a lot of people are becoming more conscious, so to speak, and becoming conscientious objectors. And then another sign about the strain in the U.S. military is the recruitment crisis. They just raised the age, I think, what was it, 42, 45, somewhere in the 40s, mid 40s, early 40s. And they are giving exemptions if you got a cannabis conviction, or if you've been smoking a little weed or whatever. So what did that tell you? That a lot of working class and poor people do not want to keep joining the U.S. military to prosecute these sort of wars, these endless wars as they have become to be known as. And so let's jump to another podcast. I believe this is from Zato, where they talk about that a little bit.
Mike Preisner, Executive Director of the Center on Conscience and War. We're more than 24 days into this U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Hundreds of Iranians have been killed. Thousands of U.S. soldiers are on their way to the Middle East in some form. Thousands and thousands of people are being displaced and killed in Lebanon, the West Bank, and Gaza alongside Iran. And the violence is spilling over into neighboring Gulf countries and beyond. Mike is joining us today to talk about what's happening within the ranks of the U.S. military and maybe if the wide public dissent to this war is perhaps leaking into the armed forces. So Mike, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start broadly before we dive a little deeper. What are you seeing generally inside the military right now?
Well, there's a lot of panic right now because, of course, a lot of units on relatively short notice got notified that guard units being activated, reserve components being activated, active duty units being told that they have perhaps imminent deployments. So I think in general, what we're hearing from is service members who want to find ways out of this because they absolutely do not support it. We're hearing a lot about a lot of disgust and outrage over U.S. conduct in the war so far, in particular, the bombing of the girls' school, the Manab massacre. That's like the number one thing that callers to our hotline cite to me as a breaking point for them, something that caused them to have a turning point and realize they had to take action to get out of this. I think across the board, there's just like a lack of trust and confidence in the military leadership, but one that they're launching a new big war. They haven't given any legitimate or rational explanation for why this needs to happen. It's the same exact war that they were warning about for years leading up to this point as being such a stupid and disastrous type of move that, we had to elect all these people because they're the only ones not too stupid to do this. And so, I think that there's a lot of very deep thinking service members who don't want to be a party to these crimes, the kind of crimes that they've seen play out in Gaza over the past several years. And a lot of people have cited that also, that's kind of what gave them a turn in political consciousness, like what happened across the broader U.S. population. But that now the U.S. partnered with Israel in another war that started out with the same kind of action that Israel was notorious for during that. It's caused a lot of people to seek options. And, these aren't people who are just trying to get out of something. They joined for college money and they're just trying to get out of this because they didn't think they're going to have to do anything hard. The people we're talking to are really tormented. They are really torn between the camaraderie they feel to the people that they're serving with, the fact that they're being faced with abandoning their friends who are being sent to die in a war that they don't agree with, torn between that and not wanting to kill in a war that they don't agree with, not wanting to be party to a war they don't agree with. And that is a very deep and difficult decision. And these are very courageous people who are choosing to exercise these rights because it's not an easy thing to do.
And I want to say when back in the early 1990s, when I was deployed to Operation Desert Shield, which turned into Desert Storm, some people know it as the Gulf War, I only came across one conscientious objector, and I didn't get in a conversation with him about even what that meant. I mean, I did have a conversation with him where he told me he wasn't deploying, he was a conscientious objector, and I left it alone at that. I was just a young 20-something-year-old. I think he might have been approaching his 30s, if not in his 30s. And so I really didn't have a concept of it, but I can imagine, what they're seeing right now. Okay, not just one or two individuals, but several individuals, let's say in a company size unit or what have you. And I can't blame them. I really can't blame them. Because those who make the decisions to go to war, those who have been profiting off of this administration, their sons and daughters will not be deployed for the benefit of the U.S. people. It'll be for the benefit of Israel. And I think everybody knows that. And not just Israel, but the military industrial complex. Lots of people are profiting from these wars and always have. So that's where we're at now. But one of the major things I want to point out is that these soldiers not wanting to deploy is because they are becoming conscious and they don't want to be proxies. They don't want to be proxies of these crazies in the Trump administration, as we heard reports about some commanders framing this as a holy crusade, you know, saying that we're doing this in the name of Jesus Christ and Donald Trump's the chosen one. And I can imagine looking at my commander, if I was put in such a situation, I'd be like, you got to be kidding me. But yeah, a lot of people are waking up and seeing how they are proxies of a system that is inherently evil. You know, I woke up after the Gulf War and did not want to be a proxy any longer, so I got out. And I could have had at least a 20-year career in the military. But perhaps you know some people that need to be quote unquote woken up, right, to become awoke or awake to how the system works. And so I would recommend getting my book, Proxy Racism, which I published about a month and a half ago, and you can get it at payhip.com/Black Talk Media Project. Don't be a proxy of the system. Don't commit war crimes or become party to a war crime as a proxy of these evil, wicked people.